All right, so if you think about it, if we go back to open chords, if you will, okay, so I'm going to switch my sound here. We go to A minor, or E minor, okay? So already, and I'm even going to switch it up even more clean, even that, okay? So when we're learning songs that we are pretty sure are based off open chords, because we hear these kind of sounds, right? It's okay to still use the other two methods to figure out what the chords are. You might get used to hearing that root movement on the sixth string and using that to figure out everything. Or this new idea of moving from the sixth string to the fifth string or the fifth string to the sixth string to figure out your things. And then once you figured it out, you could go, oh, so maybe what I want to do then is convert this to open chords. It's okay to do that. You might bypass those first two things and just wind up here. Okay? So in order to do this, there's a couple things we need to talk about. Okay? The first thing is understanding that there's some logic happening here. Okay? Now, I want to make your life as easy as possible, and I don't want to get really complex here. But we need to understand that there's some basic theory that might help us at this point. Okay? So if we understand that music is based off, and again, this shouldn't change anything about the way you've been thinking about stuff. This is a new conversation for us. But music is based off what we call the diatonic scale or major scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That scale has 7 different notes. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and then do is the octave all over again. Okay? Now again, I'm not going to blow your mind with theory here, but I just want you to think about this a little bit. So if we were in the key of, let's say the key of, well, let's first talk about the notes. The notes in music are A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. That's it. There's no H or Q or L or Z or something like that. There's A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And there's sharps and flats. We're not even going to worry about that right now. I just want you to think there's A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Okay? So if we were in the key of A, our notes would be A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And again, there are sharps and flats. Let's not worry about that right now. A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Okay? So A would be the first note, B would be the second note, C would be the third note, D, E, F, and G. Each one of those notes generates a chord. So A, the note, gets a chord. B, the note, gets a chord. C, the note, gets a chord. D, the note, gets a chord. And the way this works, very simply, and again, you'll have a PDF that you can look at this, is that if you're in a major key, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, which is what we are, okay? The first chord is always major. If you're in A major, obviously the first chord is going to be major. It's not going to be minor. That would be weird. Okay? Now, you have to trust me on some of these things because we're not going to go down the music theory rabbit hole. You can do that, and I have courses that can show you that. I'm going to give you the honest truth. I'm just giving you a kind of a skim off the top is what I want to do. So, if you're in a major key, the first chord is major. The second chord is minor. The third chord is minor. The fourth chord is major. The fifth chord is major. The sixth chord is minor. And the seventh chord is what we call diminished, which we don't care about. So here's the kicker. The first, fourth, and fifth chords are major in a major key. It doesn't matter what key you're in. It doesn't matter if you're in the key of G or A or D or C or B flat. It doesn't matter what key. The first chord, the fourth chord, and the fifth chord are major. The second, the third, and the sixth chords are minor. And the seventh is diminished, and we don't care about that. And we really don't, okay? Don't feel bad. It's the way it is. Okay, so here's my point. If you were in the key of G major, your notes would be G, A, because we got to go back to A, right? There's no H or something. So G, A, B, C, D, F, G. Again, don't worry about sharps and flats. If you play piano, don't worry about that, okay? So G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, 1, 4, 5 are major, 2, 3, 6, which is E minor, is minor. Okay? So if you can learn that theory and kind of get that idea in your head, that if you're in the key of whatever, the key of G, your first, fourth, and fifth chords are going to be major, your second, third, and sixth chords are going to be minor. This is really important to ear training Because if you tell me I'm in the key of G, or if I figure out that a song seems like it's in the key of G, the first thing I think is G, C, D, my 1, 4, 5, and then A minor, B minor, and E minor are my minor chords. Those are my optional minor chords. Now, how does that help me? Let me show you this. If we go back to some of the other examples we did here, or those, what are we actually playing? A, D, and E. A, D, and E. 1, 4, and 5. Those songs were all based off 1, 4, 5. Even na, 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 right? Na, 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 hey, G. That was based off of 1, 4, 5. It's just not starting on the 1, it's starting on the 5. So if we learn a little bit of music theory and realize that a lot of music, popular music, is based off 1, 4, and 5. Now think about it. You've probably learned songs before. What's the 1, 4, 5 in the key of G? It's G, C, and D. How many songs have you learned that have G, C, and D? How often have you heard that chord progression G, C, and D? 1 billion times. Right? Or A, D, and E. A, B, C, D, E. A, D, and E. Have you ever played a chord progression or a song that uses A, D, and E before? Now, this is my point to relative major and minor. I might hear the 1, 4, 5 in a song, but I'm not exactly sure if I'm hearing G, C, D, or A, D, E, and the truth is, it doesn't matter. I've listened to the song and I've identified that it's 1, 4, 5. So all I got to do is grab my guitar and go, oh, G, C, D? Nope, that's too low. Again, relative, right? Oh, there it is, A, D, and E, I'm in. Or whatever, C, F, G, 1, 4, 5. D, G, A, 1, 4, 5. E, A, B, 1, 4, 5. D, G, A, if I didn't say that one, 1, 4, 5. The key is irrelevant. That's why relative pitch is really good, because it doesn't matter. If we can hear the progression, we can then identify what the chords are. Okay? So in the first phase of our discussion, we weren't talking about 1, 4, or 5 or anything like that, because we're learning how to use the 6th string to move our way around. And for the style of music that we were learning, that's a great way to be able to do that. If you're learning rock or metal tunes or punk tunes that aren't really using a lot of 1, 4, 5 necessarily, we can use that 6th string to move around. But we're usually dealing with smaller progressions, right? 5, 3, 1, that sort of thing. 7, 5, 3, that sort of thing. Okay? In the second section of this course, we started talking about using the 6th string and the 5th string together. Well, we were already talking about what we're talking about now. We just didn't realize it. When we were playing Living After Midnight, we're playing a 1, 4, 5. We're playing a 1, 4, 5 right there. We just weren't thinking of it that way. And to be honest, it's okay that you're not thinking. Everything doesn't need to come back to one answer. The point with ear training is when you're listening to something like, you're not really thinking of Rock You Like a Hurricane as a 1, 4, 5 or a whatever. It's a rock tune and it's a whole step movement song. If it helps you to think of 1, 4, 5, that's great, right? Whatever works for you. For me, it doesn't really make any difference to me because I'm thinking of it more in terms of movement this way. But when it comes to, Take It Easy by the Eagles, this doesn't really work for me because my brain is going to want to go to open chords and hear that 1, 4, 5 sound. You see? So if music to you is more that sort of chord thing, maybe you listen to a lot of country music, older country music, or pop music, or easy music from the 70s or whatever. Or even if we go into the 80s with metal, you think about any of their ballads, right? Ballads. Let me turn that up a little bit there. Again, G and C, right? Or Every Rose Has Its Thorn, G, C, and D. Although Poison tends to tune down a half step. But again, that's a whole other conversation. But my point is we see these chord progressions over and over and over. 1, 4, 5. Get used to that sound, whether it's in the key of G or the key of A or the key of E, whatever works for you. But that, I mean, it's the most used chord progression in the history of music. And then what you do is, if you hear something that isn't 1, 4, 5, if you identify that it's 1, 4, 5, or it's in the key of G or whatever, and you're learning this song, maybe you figured it out as power chords and you went, oh, it's G, C, D. Well, I'm going to convert it down here to these because that sounds more like what the song's probably doing is using open chords and not power chords. That's perfect. Look at what you figured out, right? That's amazing. So you're listening to the song and it's doing this 3 times or 4 times or 8 times or whatever, and then all of a sudden you hear something else. Well, now we're back where we were before with our ear training skills. What are we hearing? Is it going down? Is it going up? Sometimes that can be misleading, especially when you're using open chords. Because if you take something like C and something like E, they don't really sound like down or up necessarily, because they're kind of using a lot of the same notes, right? So they kind of sound similar. So that's not always an easy way of doing that. But if we can figure out that we're in the key of G, like G's the main chord that we're hearing, or we're in the key of whatever, that might help us. Again, same rules as before. Maybe one chord, maybe that first chord we have to figure out, or maybe we hear 2 or 3 chords, but we use now this theory logic and go, let's try G and C and D. Well, that didn't work at all. So let's kick it up to the key of A, try A, D, and E. Or the key of C, C, F, and G, right? We might have to do that. By just grasping at straws, it makes it more difficult. Where had you used section 1 or section 2 to kind of figure out a plan and then convert it into open chords, you might get to your answer quicker, okay? But my point is this, is if we're playing those and all of a sudden we hear a different sound, not the same color, right? G, C, D. Let's say we're in the key of G and C and D and we're doing Take It Easy or something like that. We're playing something that uses those chords, but then all of a sudden we hear a different sound. It's not G, C, or D. Again, we could go back to method 1 or method 2 and try and figure it out, but if we use our newfound theory and think, okay, well, if we're in the key of G, we've used 1, 4, and 5, and we know that this new sound is not 1 or 4 or 5, what could it be? Well, it could be 2 or 3 or 6, which all 3 of those chords are minor. So it could be A minor, B minor, or E minor. And when you get in that situation, I'm telling you right now, 90% of the time, the answer is going to be the 6th chord. It just will be. Because that's the way music works. Doesn't mean it's always that way. It might be a 2, might be a 3, but always try the 6 first. So if you're doing G, and then C, and then D, and you hear, like that's that sound. We hear it all the time. Okay? Now, does music theory always have to follow this logic? No. Songs can do whatever they want. Music can do whatever they want. Again, I don't want you to get in the weeds always looking for things that don't fit or things that are difficult. I want you to keep trying to work along the lines of stuff that is easier for you and makes sense in your brain and develop that. And as you get better at it, you'll learn if you hear something that's outside the lines, you'll go, well, that's not a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4 or a 5 or a 6. It's something different. They're using something unusual there. You see, you can come to that conclusion easier if you've already developed all of these other skills. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense to you. So we have 3 different phases of being able to figure out songs by ear. Number 1 is using the 6th string as a slide rule, just moving up and down, trying to figure out what's going on. What is the main note? Does it move down? Does it move up? Does it do both? How many different sounds are we hearing? Right? How many repetitions are we hearing? Then it moves into the second phase, which is let's start using 6th and 5th string power chords and combining those, which what we're really doing at that point is using 1, 4, and 5, but we're not really, maybe. Certainly 1, 4 or 1, 5, we're hearing those larger jumps, where if we were doing that on the 6th string, it might be a little bit more difficult because we're moving a lot. So that's where we can make that transition. And then the final thing we talked about was using open chords and understanding that in the major scale, which is what we use for most things, 1, 4, 5 is major, 2, 3, 6 is minor. Okay? Now, there are songs that might be in the key of G, using G or A minor or B minor or C major, D major, E minor, whatever, right? But the main chord isn't G. The main chord might be E minor. It's still using all the chords of G, or some of the chords of G, but the main chord is actually E minor. We can still be in the key of G and use E minor as our main chord. For piano people, they call that relative minor because G major and E minor are the same thing. They have the same key signature. For guitar players, I always just teach people that 1 is major and 6 is minor in the generic world. So if you say you're in the key of G major, your relative minor is the 6th chord, which is E minor. If you're in the key of C major, your relative minor is the 6th chord, which is A minor. So you're using, you're still in the same key. You're using all the same chords, blah, 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 but you're just playing A minor more than you're playing C major, or you're playing E minor more than you're playing G major, right? Again, this isn't a theory course, and I don't want to get you confused. I just want you to understand that as you learn songs, you're going to start recognizing, oh, if I'm in the key of G major, G, C, D, I'm probably going to see an E minor in there. I might even see E minor a lot. If I'm in the key of C major, I'm going to see C, F, and G all the time. I might even see an A minor, and I might see that A minor a lot. As a matter of fact, I might even use that A minor more than the C. It's okay. You've already come to the conclusion. You already know the answer. You just plug these things in. Hey, it's Steve from GuitarZoom, and I'd like to invite you to get on a wait list to claim one of 500 GuitarZoom golden tickets on January 13th at 5 a.m. Pacific. Now, if you're one of the lucky guitar players who snags a GuitarZoom golden ticket, you're going to get 1-year access to every single guitar course, masterclass, VIP lesson, tab book, and jam track that I've ever created for a huge discount to celebrate the new year. Now, this will be your last chance to get a golden ticket until Black Friday 2023, and that's 11 months from now. And the last time we did this, they sold out. So click the button near this video to get on the wait list and get a 1-hour head start to claim your GuitarZoom golden ticket on January 13th at 5 a.m. Pacific.